Hello, America. And Judge Napolitano. A bunch of people. I minded my business in life to be able to discern all this stuff. A bunch of people from Weathersfield, for example, they have Afghan leaders of kids. Also next to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, with Zion Street, involved with syntax over the phone, wire crime acts and methods with Afghan leaders and kids, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, some Los Solitos themed that are increasingly people also collusion/S with sequence shifts with Weathersfield Police and with FBI and with courts family members with the same house/S that I never even seen them with. These are people timing with in other words, a mass identity theft fraud slanders method/S regarding the sources of the intelligence and regarding their differences uses. They're jumping into our conversation. It's already someone wants to call people names, but interbranch, get on paper. Like Colonel uh, on Judge Napolitano live stream, I put a link to it. She mentioned about how they could just take away our Facebook pages, or she didn't say Facebook, but our social media. Even a colonel. See, but they're also changing and faking what's digitally recorded as collusion/S since before I was born, whiting forensics since I was a kid too, and then as an adult. They increasingly have collusion/S with a whole bunch of natures and methods of organized crimes and names. And they still won't get onto paper. They have Bob Chase further involved with the principal child abuser, and they were more years apart. And the family's roles with that and with other natures of organized crimes and methods of them. And then them pretending they're legitimately with intelligence families, pretending to be KKK themed, black themed. And I say black themed because they use their own differences and others that way with their educators too. In other words, increasingly people putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with a Mike Roberts involved with a whole bunch like Eric Jensen and Joe DeMauro, and people involved with the Weathersfield Police with all kinds of falsified police reports, fake conversations with me, fake me being there and communicating with them as a kid and then as an adult, completely. Like these two Mendez police next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, also involved a bunch of ways there, formally, and then with the buildings, and then with the like a club there too, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime. People are increasingly involved with body dumping spots, and their uses of right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie on a mass scale, attaching people to fake ties, fake natures ties to themselves as collusion/S too, increasingly with my educators from behind my back, and they try to make fake exceptions because they're needing to do the opposite because they need to keep descriptions, not discern. Because there were a whole bunch of countries involved in the same, not just Afghan leaders and kids. It's countries A through Z. There's a hyperforeign that controls their quality of fact-checking nature. You guys have to replace what James Madison had declassified for himself and for the other founders, therefore for us. And what nature itself communicates, not just with black people's whites of eyes, and how a breaching method reassigned that, and how a breaching method has been measuring and maintaining self-valued rules with our own reassigning it for itself. Breaching method shows the experts on American history how to use their knowledge of good and evil to be collusion/S, getting over on the principle. James Madison's plan before the president/chiefs. Our founders are distinct from our presidents. James Madison's plan caused the Declaration of Independence. James Madison's plan caused the Constitutional Convention. James Madison's plan was about the counter-extortion of everyone, including the rest of the presidents and chiefs. And there are proofs that the only founder that we know the name was specifically was James Madison. There are proofs that Native Americans, native nature shows us too, all Native Americans, even the ones that didn't know about that plan. But there are proofs that Native Americans helped them make that plan. They may even, but we're directed to, they're a part of that. Obviously, Native Americans are our founders too. They enabled James Madison's plan to work. Resistance for the human species body of individual bodies. All names uses to communicate about that identity of value progression, generating all group differences, and or generating demonstrations of it when we use systems tactile ulterior from its own. It demonstrates if we are doing it with finite, grouped, and together simultaneously. And we could be doing two of those ways, coupled or all together, black people. Finite details, group details, and active relativity value. Relativity, no. Had one legitimate science voice spoken, every science is about relativity / hyperrelativity. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. They're the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. And they're distinct from the other species' body's eyes, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but per that further distinct identity of simultaneous nature that science gives us as itself means to discern the identity the sciences share. To an extent, it's body of value progression, hyper invisible but still discernible. But where that is discernible, it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that here, or as it forced from here as forced space nature transfer, as a negative identity of relativity to itself. Regarding how it is functional too, being hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. Many Americans who are not even Native American, it's the first thing we know we have to lock in our mind. See, but if we do this locked it in right properly, it's true always. A human fact treatment nature breach method was playing the difference of the Native Americans and every other person's difference. Don't leave out the hyper evidential of having black people's whites of eyes. So a bunch of people who have roles with predicate acts on my street in my area, with federal evidence as crime syntax, investigators use remotely criminally foreign impulse, tactically delusions, raw collusion / us with crime scenes, including police and fire departments. And then they pretend passions and emotions when people criticize people to change the fake what's said, to self-value rules with the fake and change the digital. Wire crime, WFSB attachment, fake conversations with themselves. See, the real sacrifices of people with their jobs and titles, like that we owe them thanks for, they're incapable of receiving that properly because there are still collusions / us that we have to address at the same time. They want and need to have a nature of debate where the nature of it itself is collusion / us pretending they can't realize that already interbranch intelligence tied to them had / have self-value collusion / us with the same sequence shifts, the same criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality aspects, and natures of collusion too, with all sides of criminal and civil cases, interbranch intelligence at the same time, news, name the difference of guilt there or the intelligence next to them and next to the crime scenes, and relative body dumping spots. Relative, no. Relativity is not theory. And two, when they speak about wars, they can't speak about one war legitimately. We have been forced, with the Russians and China, we were here and there forced, grouped, tactically ulterior from our nature per its system. And so therefore it rolls with our needs to use our names through its system. But we're all abridged systems, individually grouped in all humanity voicings. You guys are offensively preventing me from countering before and after the World Trade Center attack in New York City. People interstates and internationally colluded against me and against others, but I could only tell for myself. And the news also faked and changed what other people said too. And they just totally faked conversations with me as mixed natures of organized crimes, as World Trade Center predicate acts. At the same time where they were forcing child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, first forced, as ones involved increasingly with our side, with the World Trade Center attack, increasingly with collusions with Saudis, forced upon them by Wethersfield police intercities. Some Mendez police attached me a fake conversation with the older, never had a word of conversation with the older Mendez brother, who walked by me smiling a couple times. And that was it. Only time I ever saw him on campus. I only saw his brother inside of campus one time. And then one time outside of campus, trying to make fake exceptions. These are increasingly people involved with those. These are intelligence families involved also with security families at the campuses that have roles with shopping centers and malls and overt criminal enterprises, private ones pretend to be against such. Also, relative delusions. We're going to have to address the delusions too. See, they want to have debates. Judge Napolitano has a guy who's right about how no one's sticking up for Palestine. But he's simultaneously wrong a whole bunch of ways at the same time. And people want to have sides and needs to have say, oh, it's it, man. Subject treatment's measured and maintained. There's sensing too. Self-value depends on fact, nature, quality aspects, nature styles that can't depend that and afford to have the hyperforeign that is relative here discerned. A hyperforeign breaching method designed tactically denatured suburbs. The only reason this appears to be debatable is because you have replaced what our founders had to classify for themselves about it, and what our founders declassified for themselves about it, and what nature itself communicates about it. Who denies that there are hyper archaeological evidences or archaeological evidences as New York City is manifest in demonstration of it with criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw quality aspects in nature, self-value rolls with it too. Otherwise, that body is sensed by the same hyperforeign breaching method that had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And our founders had declassified for us to understand that clearly, the breaching method against every human difference, and helping it at the same time. It does the opposite too, because it's collusion / S needs to keep the breaching method left out in the past, in the future too. Whole bunch of people tied to a former Mayor Gold and other mayors from Wethersfield and their neighbors have collusion / S with the Board of Education, increasingly with drugs and medicines crimes and untimely deaths, and child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, first forced. A DeMoro family confessed and repeated that there are people with the name O'Connor involved. And they also put the kids to fake conversations and ties to their family members. Then they start getting them to say whatever and then covering up. And in other words, they're trying to set perjury traps. A bunch of people from the Connecticut courts and the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices have also with the state capitol and next to it, like a Chuck Casper recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has collusions by identity theft, fraud, slanders with people next to the state capitol and his educators and former mayors involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. There are people all along Route 175 at conjunctions to it and to that, like Ridge Road. People all along Ridge Road say and do things to put fake things in databases and make self-valued sequence shifts when people are looking at the information of intelligence. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. Not even a police form, my lawyer. Lawyers too, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, their family members, their sources, the interbranch, and the intelligence, foreign and domestic, criminally foreign influence, A through Z at the same time. That's what our founders left declassified for us to understand. When did that stop? So a bunch of people like a Joe Aiello sought me out to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, plant fake exceptions, and with a whole bunch of people involved with the fire department next to Trinity College and on Zion Street, involved with predicate acts on my street, with people and home break-ins in my street, who involved Joe Aiello with them through other natures of federal evidences crimes, identify sequence shifts, and identity theft, fraud, slams with a former mayor Gold too, and Weathersfield Parks and the side entrances to it, and with their motivations, they're being used to hide, a breaching method as well as with their motivations, and their educators. Increasingly, Joe Aiello's educators. He's one of the many names that their confessions, recorded confess, demonstrate from. He has roles with people on the state judicial branch office and corrections offices, and with the houses and businesses next to campuses and next to Harvard Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, has roles with them with names next to the campuses intercities and intra cities, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, mass fake transcripts pretended into databases, and use/s of cover-ups of integrity of courts having been collusion/s with all that came before them, and all that is all they are capable of now. Forgiveness is so we could address how the names of the people of science is, and how everyone has stayed collusion/s with use of location/s everywhere the human species body is, through an as systems tactically ulterior from the one that nature uses, showing us again human species body of individual bodies, individual different human species body made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, and they're a totally different species bodies, and each of them is made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, because we are being shown an individual identity of value progression, that which is generating all differences. All exceptions in exception nature come also with demonstration/s of the rest of its complete nature, the identity of all space/existence, that which does not fit in here because it's too great, too finite, and with active relativity distinctly from itself, into and as itself, distinctly where and how itself is not where and how it is not capable of being juxtaposed with matter, and a portion of it is only capable of being juxtaposed with it as matter, and as increasing value here, or as it forced from here, as Earth's a special difference, and as our own, as humanity's forced from here. Humanity is the only species body of individual bodies that is having been used remotely self-valued roles through an as systems, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought per natural law, demonstration/s of it. We're going to observe the identity that is showing us why and how. The predicate act is valued to the law the same exact way, distinctly but non-distinctly from how the predicate is valued to the identity of English and the other languages. We're going to observe how and why, where they don't share an identity. It comes with exceptions and exception nature and demonstration of the same. In other words, but so intercities next to Central Connecticut State University, there are intelligence families, and that's in New Britain, Connecticut, and there are ones with Harvard next to Zion Street. A bunch of people with a whole bunch of different countries have been pretending passions and emotions on Facebook with New Britain Superior Court people involved with rape threats with a principal child abuser. And these are increasingly people from other schools who colluded with people that went to my school. I didn't even know them at all. And others tried to make fake exceptions by putting in tricks. I mean, like a Debbie Gold. Increasingly, people tied to a Debbie Gold put fake things in the databases with intelligences near. I never saw her near me. She did put sequence shifts roles, and her father, a former mayor Gold, and other mayors and their family members. There's also a Lee Gold, who's one of the ones involved with whiting forensics, is increasingly involved with the gold people with the name Gold. There's also David, I believe his name is David Santangelo. I'm not sure. A whole bunch of people conjunctive to a John Maiano all along the Berlin Turnpike, too, as one of the ones involved, too, with the Czech Casper. And there are educators involved with the state capitol and spots next to it. Has something to do with their roles, acting tied to the people, putting predicate acts with facts and databases, trying to make it look like we had words or they even know me. Sequence shifts roles too. Has something to do with the roles all along Route 175 from the founding locations too. The same names, collusions all along Route 3. All sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions and people associated with DACA throughout the see. These are jobs, and when they speak about these are agreements and negotiations and tariffs and all these things, we're supposed to address how the international companies had collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and way worse, a hyperforeign breaching method that had slavery entrenched sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, but sickly non-distinctly too. And there are ways that we can discern that are also coming with means to discern a human fact human nature breaching method being having been a scientific value, replaced right from what our founders' communications actually were to us. And no, this is not, it's hidden and or held behind the back because they have uses of the words of what everyone said, pretending that it's debatable, that they had no free speech. And that nature of debate relies upon quality aspects of nature. That is criminally foreign tactically delusions wrought in nature as criminal insidiousness, as wrongdoing, as wrongdoers. Not even a lawyer. In other words, black pupils. I'm an expert on the nature of English grammar and our communications. There are a bunch of people with Central Connecticut State University that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed a whole bunch of natures of organized crime with a detective Samuda, involved also with leaders of the kids intercities and the abuses of their kids and their names, roles switching and forging names with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and others intercities and intra-cities, intercampuses and intra-campuses, putting fake transcripts there, and roles collusion /S with use/S recorded of names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and relative interstate court cases, where they were putting the same sequence shifts with the interbranch, the same identity theft, fraud, same fake motivations, timing of it, including with the World Trade Center attack, long term before it, the night before it, and that day before it, including with the court from inside the court itself. The court's identity was stolen. In the forum, for example, it was worse than this, but there was a sequence shift. They changed the papers that were timed and legally handed into timely handed into the Ninth Circuit Court, right next to the World Trade Center attack towers, right before the attack from inside the court. They had shown the court from inside the court manipulated legal papers and outcome as collusion /S too with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and organized crimes groups recorded involved with the people on all sides of that case too, and their sources and their lawyers. The lawyers are incapable of making a proper subject treatment. Notice subject being one of the identities of one of the distinct identities of invisible but still discernible. Part of it, parts of it, of the identity of the hyper simultaneous nature. The hyper invisible but still discernible, that is conjunctive to the invisible but still discernible parts of speech of English grammar. Why and how we have to appreciate more than one name for a verb, for example, a participle nature, a present participle or a past participle. Those are names hyper-additional for a verb. And they're all past and present. No. The past is hyper invisible, but still discernible. And the present comes with an extent that we know is hyper invisible but still discernible. We don't know about. In other words, but we know it exists. And the future is a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. A distinct way it's hyper invisible but still. You can discern its body of value progression, how it is only increasing value as the identity, as the science, as the seasons, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously to itself distinct. In other words, its complete identity of relationship to itself and the value of that only mixes with all parts of space / existence one way. And we could ignore that and make exceptions to that. But it demonstrates we're using exception nature. Through an that system's tactical theory from its own, where it teaches about positive and negative. We are shown cell body, cell nucleus, cell walls / S manifest. And the walls, they have this body of life coming through them, valuing water in their elements, positive or negative, and the gases in their elements, positive or negative to the plant, the body of life. Nature itself is teaching us about positive and negative. It's showing us its identity of value progression. Every identity is relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. And where neutrality is manifest, it is a quality of diffusion. But to this quality of diffusion is through an eye system that we are forbid short words on proper. So Channel 3 News has a bunch of people. That's in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. They have a bunch of people involved with organized crimes against kids, elderly, veterans, and then pretending things like that are allegations. To specific, that's why they attach me to fake conversations. That's proofs of it. Get them on paper with these are people next to Fox Connecticut News and Harper Connecticut through time too. Increasingly, they recorded capacity demonstrate confirmed. They have collusions all around Route 3, conjunctions to into that. And for the founding locations of Main Street and Old Weathersfield, conjunctions to into that, like Church Street. There are houses on Church Street and increasingly involved with fake transcripts and with campuses' names involved with it in all sides of criminal and civil cases. Cases. In other words, please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Get me off of fake conversations with the news. And they're changing digital evidences. Fox News has been with writing forensics names and with federal agencies and a whole bunch of different countries with the names they brought involved with this. And get me a response for what I caught them doing. And intercampuses and intra-campuses too, and with the names next to them. And get them onto paper, Weathersfield Police, with this Bill Colot and the Bob Chase confessions tied to him. It's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Some Mendez police brothers involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids and overt criminal enterprises, people associated with them with the Weathersfield Police Department with predicate acts with them, and their roles with the campuses, and with the Britain Superior Court, and with the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News, and with their roles standing there as police forms next to Fox Connecticut News and Harper Connecticut too. I never saw them at Trinity College. Increasingly, people from Trinity College have collusion / S with them. Played together on my street. People tied to them. All kinds of roles with home break-ins, like with Joe DeMar, Heather Hansen, they're educators. Mr. Neville also will record a capacity demonstrate confirmed. He has collusions with people live near him on along Route 3 with an apartment building there. And in other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence. In other words,